Our next speaker, some of you will know because there's a few friends in the audience, is Michael Aichhholzer. It's not easy for me to say. Sorry, Michael. Member of the Men's Link team, Michael is a crusader for young men who are struggling with life and a man wise with life experience who imbues his story with gravitas and a hard reality but an ultimately positive message. Did you like that? Because I just wrote that. So, thank you. And also another power lifter. So, Michael.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming. My name is Michael. I'm 56 years old. I'm married to Catherine, and I have an adult daughter, Deborah, from a previous marriage. I'm an ex-bouncer, a retired naval officer, a war veteran, a competitive powerlifter, and these days a public speaker. I also have an adjustment disorder. I've suffered from anxiety and depression for most of my life. My father was a hard man. He was a hard worker, a hard drinker, and a hard disciplinarian. He rarely displayed emotion and certainly did not know weakness or vulnerability. As the eldest of 5 children and a male, my father had a high expectation that I would follow his ideal of manhood and wasn't shy in telling me when I failed to do so. Love was not a word that was in his lexicon, and I learned from an early age to internalise my emotions for fear of attracting his anger. Big boys didn't cry, you see, or they'd be given something to cry about. I developed very low self-esteem and low self-confidence from an early age. To overcome this, I embarked on a path of hypermasculinity. I figured that becoming a real man would solve all my problems. I joined the Navy when I was 15 to get away from my dad. The Navy I joined was a men's-only club. Women couldn't join. And I found myself in an environment where I was judged by how hard I worked, how hard I played, how hard I drank, how hard I fornicated. I jumped from the frying pan into the fire, and I worked really hard to meet this new ideal, to continue to mould myself into this real man that I needed to be, and I became very successful at that, at satisfying society's expectations of what we needed to be as men. I built myself up physically, and I built emotional walls around me to protect me from the outside world. I became so good at suppressing my feelings, I eventually couldn't really fully connect emotionally with anyone. I wanted warmth and to be loved, and I needed to be constantly reassured that somebody cared for me. It didn't matter if I was in a relationship already. My lack of self-esteem was such that I needed others to prove they cared for me and that I was wanted, so I continually sought new relationships in this endless cycle of conquest and loss. I was married at 21, we had a daughter at 23, and I was divorced at 26. The state of my relationship with my ex-wife and the relationship I had with myself was such that I signed my daughter over to adoption to her new dad and lost all contact with her for over 20 years. I began working in my spare time as a bouncer. I was one of the tough guys that other guys looked up to, or even better, feared, and the girls wanted to be with. I was a man. At the same time, I fought with my anxiety and my depression with increasing bouts of crying. I was still hiding my emotions, locking them up in these little boxes that I'd put in a cupboard in my mind, and I'd slam the door on them. But every 6 months or so, I'd have a mini breakdown, and I'd cry uncontrollably for a period of time before I drank a cup of concrete, hardened up, and forged ahead. I met my wife Catherine in my mid-30s, and for the first time in my life I felt an emotional connection with another human being that I hadn't felt before. I felt safe. I was still a tough guy. I still found it hard to hug my wife, but my womanizing days were over. My self-esteem started to improve, but I still found myself needing to be validated by others, to be approved by others, still living in fear that someone would discover that I wasn't the real man I professed to be, that I was simply wearing a mask of masculinity. In 2003, I deployed to Baghdad. I was at war. I wore body armour, I carried a weapon every day, and I felt that now I was really fully satisfying my obligation to the man box. At least until I got home 6 months later, when that door in the cupboard in my mind that had been holding all these emotions for 40-odd years just suddenly sprang open. It happened on a day when I was in the laundry with Catherine, and she asked me to take a basket of laundry out and hang it up. And for some reason at that point in time, I thought that was the most unreasonable request that had ever been made of me, and I got angry. I got mad. And I started punching the wall of the laundry. I turned around to say something to Catherine, and suddenly there was this look on her face that made me stop. This woman who'd literally changed my life, who'd shown me that I deserved to be loved, that I deserved to be cared for, was now looking at me with fear in her eyes. She wasn't sure what I was going to do to her or to myself. So I realised I needed to get advice. I needed to get some help. My first attempt didn't work too well. I went to a psychiatrist, and she asked me to lie down on the couch and tell her how I felt about stuff. And to be honest, I didn't feel anything, so it was really hard to talk about that. But I played the game. I went through it. I decided all I needed to do was to harden up some more, to put a sturdier lock on that door to that cupboard in my mind, and I carried on. 5 years later, the wheels came off my little cart. I was studying in Melbourne while Catherine was living up here in Canberra. Her mother, who'd cared for me like her own son, had just died, and we were seeing each other every 2 to 3 weeks, putting on our best faces while both of us were falling apart inside with grief. Over the first 6 months of 2008, my mental state declined to the point I considered taking my own life. By July, I'd withdrawn from course, returned to Canberra, and I'd sought professional help again. I learned to understand my emotions. I learned what triggered them. Most importantly, I learned tools and strategies to manage my anxiety and depression whenever they reared their familiar heads. I think like many guys, I needed to be able to do something about my problems, not just talk about them. Don't get me wrong, talking is the first step, and I found over the years that talking about my condition has allowed me to become more comfortable with it, to accept it as part of me as opposed to being scared of it. I believe mental health is like physical health, and we've heard that so far already tonight. With the right coach, nutrition, activities, and sometimes medicine, you can improve your mental fitness in the same way that you can improve physical fitness. You don't have to wait until something bad, that traumatic event, happens in your life. You find your passion, your happy place, learn to relax, meditate, sing, breathe. It really doesn't matter what it is. Just learn to constructively deal with the inevitable challenges that will come with your life. This is what I've learned from my experience. Talking to somebody, getting advice on how to deal with struggles we all face as human beings, is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of courage, even strength. Nowadays, I talk to guys in schools, colleges, sporting teams, and corporate workplaces about the importance of talking, of getting advice for their problems. I'm not cured, not by any means. For me, this disorder will be a lifelong companion, a black dog by my side. But the more I've talked about my condition, the stronger I've become, the more mentally fit I've become, and the better able I am to deal constructively with my anxiety and my depression. I'm not defined by my condition. I've learned to thrive despite, or perhaps even because of it. Thank you.